Usually when we talk about stepping into a professional workspace, like, say, a master woodworker's shop, there is this immediate physical sense of order.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You walk in, and the chisels are, lined up by size on a magnetic rack. The table saw is positioned exactly in the center for maximum clearance. And the extraction hoses, they map out the exact flow of the sawdust.
Right.
You can literally see the logic of the workflow just laid out in the physical space.
Yeah.
The limitations of the room tell you exactly how to behave.
And that physical constraint is actually, it's a form of guidance.
Right.
The tools dictate the environment, and then the environment guides the craftsman.
Yeah.
You don't have to invent the concept of gravity or space before you cut a piece of oak.
Exactly. I mean, you literally cannot put the table saw on the ceiling.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of digital imaging, specifically into a powerhouse application like Adobe Photoshop.
Yeah.
And suddenly that physical, comforting reality just completely vanishes.
It's gone.
Right. You are walking into this infinitely large, invisible, weightless workshop. The tools can be anywhere. The canvas can be any size, with any resolution, across any color space.
Yeah, which is terrifying for a lot of people.
Exactly. Without a map, that infinite freedom isn't empowering. For most people, it is honestly just completely paralyzing.
It really is the absolute definition of digital overwhelm. I mean, we see this all the time with creative professionals who are transitioning to new software.
You have all the power in the world.
Right, a tool capable of rendering Hollywood-level matte paintings or pixel-perfect UI designs, but there's no obvious starting point. The software doesn't force you into a good habit.
No, it doesn't.
It will happily let you build a terrible, highly destructive workflow if you don't know any better.
Which brings us to our mission for today. Welcome to you listening to another Deep Dive. Today, we are taking you right to the threshold of that infinite digital workshop. We are exploring the foundational introductory chapter of the Adobe Photoshop CC Classroom in a book, specifically the 2018 release. And just a quick note for you listening, if you want to get your hands on the physical book we're discussing today, or if you want to follow our channel for more deep dives into creative workflows, you can find all those links right down in the description, or you can just scan a QR code right on your screen.
Highly recommend grabbing the physical book if you can.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because on the surface, an introduction chapter might just look like, a dry table of contents or a legal disclaimer.
Usually, yeah.
But what we found in these pages is something much, much more profound.
It really is a pedagogical masterclass. I mean, the overarching theme of this deep dive is understanding not just what Photoshop CC 2018 can technically execute.
Right, the features.
Exactly, not just the features, but how this specific educational framework empowers you to learn at your own pace. We're looking at how this curriculum synthesizes both a physical print medium and a highly dynamic digital ecosystem to basically act as your guide.
Yeah, your personal, highly opinionated guide through that infinite workspace you just described.
Yes, so the source material today is strictly that introductory chapter 00. It serves as a philosophical roadmap for the entire book.
It sets the tone.
It's not just telling you where the buttons are, it's guiding you through the process of mastering digital imaging excellence by instilling the mindset of a professional before you even open a photograph.
What's fascinating here is that even in a supposed introduction, we immediately run into vital workflow habits.
Like right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. Stringent system prerequisites, critical safety nets like preference backups and color space management, things that quite literally separate the amateurs who destroy client files from the true professionals who deliver reliable assets.
Yeah.
The introduction is essentially teaching you how to learn and how to protect yourself before it ever attempts to teach you how to edit.
Right. It sets the ground rules. And the very first rule it establishes is acknowledging the sheer scale of the software we are dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
The text immediately highlights Adobe Photoshop CC as the benchmark for digital imaging. It notes its powerful performance and its expansive image editing features. But then, almost in the same breath, it introduces Adobe Camera Raw,
Yes.
specifically noting its flexibility and control with raw images, TIFFs, and JPEGs. Now, I have to push back on this workflow right away because I've always found Camera Raw to be a bit of a frustrating speed bump.
Really? A speed bump?
Well, yeah. If Photoshop is this high-end, incredibly complex digital Swiss Army knife, Why do I have to stop in this other interface first?
Yeah.
Why not just drag the JPEG directly into the main Photoshop interface, slap some adjustment layers on it, and just get to work?
I see what you mean.
What am I actually losing by skipping that dedicated darkroom step?
Well, I wouldn't call it a speed bump. I'd call it an essential quarantine zone for your image data.
A quarantine zone.
Yeah, you're bringing up JPEGs. And assuming you, the listener, are well aware that a JPEG is a lossy, compressed format where the camera has already thrown away massive amounts of dynamic range just to save space on the memory card.
Right.
Because of that, the Camera Raw interface becomes even more critical. Yes, Photoshop has adjustment layers, but Camera Raw isn't just an interface. It's a completely different processing engine.
How so? I mean, isn't contrast just contrast whether I apply it in Camera Raw or via a curves layer in Photoshop?
Not at all, no. When you open a RAW file, or even when you force a TIFF or JPEG through the Camera Raw engine, you are operating in a parametric editing environment.
Okay.
You aren't pushing pixels around yet. You are manipulating the mathematical instructions of how the raw sensor data should be interpreted into visible light.
Oh, wow.
So if you try to pull, say, 3 stops of exposure out of the shadows of a compressed file in standard Photoshop, you're going to get horrific color banding.
Just a noisy, pixelated mess.
Exactly. Awful artifacting because the data simply isn't there in the pixels. But Camera Raw has access to the unadulterated sensor data.
So it's reading the original math.
Right. It allows you to rescue highlights that look completely blown out and recover shadows that look pitch black. And it does all of this non-destructively before the image is ever flattened into a working color space.
So it's really about sequence and preserving maximum fidelity.
Precisely.
You do your heavy global mathematical interpretations in the darkroom of Camera Raw, and then you bring that optimized, perfectly exposed digital negative into the workshop of Photoshop for the intricate, localized pixel manipulation.
Yeah.
You know, the compositing, the masking, the retouching.
Exactly. And by emphasizing Camera Raw right out of the gate in the introduction, the book is signaling a professional agency standard workflow.
That makes sense.
No high-end commercial retouching house just opens a file directly into Photoshop and starts hacking away at the background layer.
That would be a disaster.
It would be. They demand the raw files, they process them for maximum dynamic range, and only then do they begin the edit. So the curriculum is forcing you into a professional posture from day one.
That shifts my perspective entirely. It's not an extra step. It's literally pouring the foundation of the house.
Exact.
And that highly structured approach speaks to the whole methodology of the classroom in a book series. The text explains that this is an official training series developed directly with the support of Adobe product experts.
You're right.
And it's built to accommodate 2 very different types of users.
This is a really key point.
Yeah, if you are a beginner, it provides the fundamental concepts. But if you're a veteran, it promises advanced features, workflow optimizations, and web prep. What stands out to me is the flexibility it offers.
Yeah, the modularity.
Right. The book explicitly says you can follow it end to end in a linear progression, or you can just cherry pick the lessons that match your immediate real-world needs. How does this dual-path approach map onto the realities of how professionals actually acquire new skills?
Well, it maps perfectly onto the principles of adult learning theory. Specifically, the shift from pedagogical learning, which is instructor-led and linear, to andragogical learning.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Andragogical learning is self-directed and problem-centric. When you are a complete novice to a complex system like Photoshop, you have no mental model of the software. You literally don't know what you don't know.
You're just staring at a wall of buttons.
Exactly. So you need the linear path. You need the instructor to take you by the hand, teaching you the concept of layers before they teach you clipping masks, and teaching you clipping masks before they teach you advanced channel selections.
Right. You can't build the roof before you pour the foundation.
But as you transition into a working professional, your relationship with learning changes entirely. You don't have the luxury of sitting down and reading a manual cover to cover when an art director is demanding a specific mobile UI asset in 3 hours.
Right. Professional learning is highly situational.
Highly.
It's panic-driven learning. You have a fire to put out, and you need a very specific extinguisher.
Precisely. You have a highly specific problem. Say, you suddenly need to know how to export 30 different artboards at 3 different resolutions for an iOS development team.
And you need it done yesterday.
Yeah, you need the solution immediately. The classroom in a book respects that reality. By modularizing the lessons, it allows the veteran to jump straight to Chapter 13, extract the exact workflow technique they need, and immediately apply it to their live project.
That's incredibly practical.
But there's another pedagogical tool they use that I find even more critical. The text mentions that every single lesson concludes with the review section summarizing the concepts and asking specific questions.
Yeah, at the end of chapter review, I have to be honest, it feels almost elementary, like a middle school textbook quiz.
I know, it does.
But I imagine there's a serious cognitive reason for forcing the reader to stop and actually answer questions.
There is, and it's the antidote to what the industry calls tutorial hell.
Oh, I know tutorial hell intimately.
I think we all do.
It's when you watch like 4 hours of YouTube tutorials on complex compositing. You follow along perfectly, your image looks exactly like the instructors, and then the next day you open a blank canvas and realize you have absolutely no idea how to replicate what you just did.
Exactly, you learn nothing. And the psychological mechanism behind that failure is passive compliance.
Passive compliance.
Yeah, when you just follow step-by-step instructions, click this menu, input a radius of 4.5 pixels, set the blend mode to overlay, your brain isn't actually processing the underlying logic.
It's just a robot following a script.
Right, it's just mimicking actions. You haven't encoded the why or the how into your long-term memory. Those end-of-lesson reviews, they're utilizing active recall and spaced repetition.
Yeah, okay.
By forcing you to look away from the software interface and answer a conceptual question about why you used a specific mask, the book forces your brain to retrieve the information without the step-by-step crutch.
You have to do the work.
Yeah, the physical struggle of retrieval is what actually cements the neural pathway and moves the skill from short-term working memory into long-term mastery.
So you have to prove to yourself you didn't just paint by numbers.
Exactly.
You have to prove you actually understand the mechanics of the tool. Okay, so we have this incredibly structured, psychologically sound learning framework. But what exactly are we applying it to? Because software evolves incredibly fast.
It really does.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text naturally brings us to the specific innovations of this 2018 edition. It mentions some interface updates like the new Start Workspace and the new document dialogue, which, feel like basic UX housekeeping.
Yeah, fairly standard stuff.
But then it hits us with the heavy hitters. Select and mask for easily isolating complex subjects. And face-aware liquify for altering facial features and expressions algorithmically.
Those two features alone represent a massive seismic shift in the underlying philosophy of the software.
How so?
Well, we are moving from manual pixel manipulation to algorithmic image interpretation.
And that is exactly where I want to push back. Let's really zero in on face-aware liquify and the select and mask features.
Okay, let's do it.
Because historically, and you know this if you worked in the industry prior to these updates, cutting out a subject with flyaway hair against a busy background or subtly adjusting the shape of a model's jawline, that required immense, painstaking, almost surgical skill.
Oh, hours of work.
Right. You had to deeply understand channel calculations, pixel flow, edge detection, and human anatomy. You spent years mastering the liquify mesh to ensure you didn't accidentally warp the background texture when you adjusted a cheekbone.
Yeah, the dreaded warp to background.
Exactly. If the software is now introducing tools that just do this automatically, faceware implies the computer recognizes the geometry of the face on its own. Doesn't the automation of these highly complex tasks fundamentally change what it means to be a photo editor?
That's a fair question.
Are we just pushing a make it look good button now? Does the craft disappear?
That is the perennial fear whenever automation enters a creative field. But I think that perspective confuses friction with craftsmanship.
Interesting. Friction versus craftsmanship.
Yeah. The goal of an algorithmic tool like face-aware liquify isn't to replace the artist's eye, it's to shift the artist's focus. It frees up your cognitive bandwidth.
But isn't the mechanical execution part of the art?
Well, let's examine the old workflow for liquefying a face. If an art director asked you to slightly widen a subject's smile or correct the asymmetry of an eye, what did you actually spend your time doing?
Zooming in very closely.
Right. You spent 80% of your energy managing the mechanical difficulty of the tool. You had to paint a freeze mask over the areas you didn't want to move. You had to carefully select a brush size that perfectly matched the radius of the cheek.
Yeah, constantly resizing the brush.
You had to use the forward warp tool with microscopic iterative nudges, just terrified that you were going to distort the pupil or blur the texture of the skin.
It was incredibly stressful.
It was. Only 20% of your energy was spent on the actual creative decision of how the expression should look.
You were fighting the tool as much as you were editing the image.
Precisely. FaceAware Liquify uses advanced algorithmic facial recognition to instantly map the geometry of the face. It identifies the exact boundaries of the eyes, the bridge of the nose, the curve of the lips, and the structure of the jaw.
So it does the mapping for you.
Yes, and it provides you with parametric sliders to adjust them intuitively. The computer handles the complex spatial geometry, allowing the human to handle the art.
So it removes the mechanical friction, allowing you to iterate faster.
Exactly. You can try 5 different incredibly subtle adjustments to the width of a jawline in the time it used to take to manually execute one flawless warp.
Wow.
The definition of the high-end photo editor shifts. You are no longer valued simply because you are someone who is good at pushing pixels without tearing them. You are valued because you are someone who has a refined visual taste, an understanding of subtle human expression, and a creative vision.
The software is closing the gap between your imagination and the final result.
Beautifully said, yes.
That makes a lot of sense. It elevates the role from a mechanical technician to a creative director.
Yeah.
But it's not just the editing tools that evolved in 2018.
No, the whole ecosystem shifted.
Right. The updates don't just change how we edit photos. They fundamentally change what we are creating in the first place.
Yeah.
The text explicitly points out that these lessons will lead you through using multiple artboards to design screens more efficiently for a range of display sizes. It talks about previewing designs on actual mobile hardware in real time,
Which was huge.
using the export as command to generate optimized web and mobile assets, and even showcasing your work on an Adobe Portfolio website. We have come a very long way from Photoshop just being a digital darkroom for a single 8x10 photograph.
We really have.
Now it's acting as a central hub for designing entire cross-device digital ecosystems.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the creative industry, what we are seeing encoded into this 2018 curriculum is the reflection of a massive paradigm shift.
A shift toward mobile.
Yes. For the vast majority of its history, Photoshop was fundamentally a print-first tool. Its entire architecture was built around high-resolution, single-canvas images destined for physical output.
Right.
You were working in CMYK color spaces, managing ink limits, and worrying about DPI for a magazine spread, a billboard, or a brochure.
You had one canvas,
Yeah.
and the boundaries of that canvas were the physical edges of the paper it was going to be printed on.
But by 2018, the world had aggressively and irreversibly shifted to a digital-first, and specifically a mobile-first, reality. A graphic designer isn't just making a static poster anymore.
No.
They're designing a responsive user interface that has to adapt and look flawless on a massive 27-inch 4K desktop monitor, a 10-inch tablet in both portrait and landscape orientation, and 3 different varying sizes of smartphones.
And before multiple artboards, how did designers even manage that? I remember the dark days of creating 5 entirely separate PSD files for one webpage.
Well, it was brutal.
Or trying to manage insane folder structures with hundreds of layer comps just to show a client how the navigation bar would collapse on a phone. It was an organizational nightmare.
But it was completely unsustainable, hence the introduction of multiple artboards. Instead of opening 5 different files, you define 5 distinct screens side by side within one massive, infinite workspace.
That's a game changer.
It is. You can drag a button from the desktop layout and drop it directly onto the mobile layout to see how the scale translates immediately, and that leads directly to the emphasis on the export as command.
Right, which replaced the old Save for Web legacy dialogue. Why was that such a crucial update that the book specifically highlights it?
Because of the performance budget of modern web design. When you're designing a mobile app, you can't just save out a massive, uncompressed background asset.
Right, the app would be huge.
It will cause the app to bloat, the website will load too slowly over a cellular network, and the user will abandon the page before they even see your beautiful design.
Speed is everything.
Exactly. The export as architecture allows a designer to take a single artboard and, with one click, generate that asset at 1x, 2x, and 3x resolutions simultaneously, automatically compressing them as lightweight SVGs or optimized JPEGs.
Yeah.
The fact that the classroom in a book makes generating these specific optimized web assets and showcasing work on an Adobe portfolio an essential part of the curriculum, it proves that Adobe isn't just teaching you how to use a software tool.
What are they doing?
They're teaching you how to be viable and employable in the modern creative economy.
You need to know how to get your work out into the world efficiently, at scale.
Yes.
And to help guide the reader through all of this, from the highest level creative concepts of mobile design down to the nitty-gritty algorithmic details of face-aware masking, The text notes a very specific recurring voice woven throughout the book.
Julianne Cost.
Yes. It says this edition is chock full of tips and techniques from one of Adobe's own experts, Photoshop evangelist Julianne Cost. Oh, I love that title, Software Evangelist.
It's a great title.
It sounds almost spiritual. But practically speaking, what is the actual value of having a software evangelist inject their voice throughout a highly technical textbook? Why not just have the engineers who wrote the code write the book?
Because engineers and artists speak entirely different languages. And an evangelist bridges that massive communication gap.
How so?
Software engineers are brilliant at building incredible complex tools. They write the complex mathematics for the multiple artboard architecture or the machine learning models behind select and mask. But engineers fundamentally think in terms of logic, code structure, and feature parity.
Right. They're thinking about how it works under the hood.
Exactly. Artists, on the other hand, think in terms of fluid workflow, impending client deadlines, and creative expression. An evangelist like Julianne Cost sits exactly at the intersection of those two worlds.
She translates the mathematics of the software into the magic of the workflow.
That's a perfect way to put it. Her job is to deeply, intimately understand the raw software engineering and then translate it into practical, creative applications for the end user.
That makes total sense.
If you just read an engineer's manual on how to use a complex channel masking tool, it will be dry, sequential, and lack all context. But when an evangelist injects a tip, she provides real-world, situational awareness.
Like a pro tip.
Right. She might add a note saying, hey, while the manual dictates a 5-step process to achieve this blend mode, out in the high-end retouching field, we actually map this specific action to a custom keyboard shortcut, and it saves us 10 hours a week on volume shoots.
Wow, that's huge.
It completely humanizes the learning experience. It stops feeling like you are reading a stereo manual and starts feeling like you have a master craftsman leaning over your shoulder, whispering decades of hard-earned industry secrets.
It brings us right back to that physical workshop feeling we talked about at the beginning. You aren't alone in the infinite digital space.
Yeah.
You have a seasoned guide.
You do.
But as we shift gears here, it's vital to acknowledge that before you can listen to that guide, before you can utilize the multiple artboards or unleash the algorithmic power of the face-aware tools, you need the shop itself to be structurally sound.
Absolutely.
You simply cannot build a digital masterpiece on a shaky hardware foundation.
A recurring theme in any professional digital workflow is that preparation and system architecture are just as critical as creative execution. If your system is bottlenecking, your creativity will bottleneck.
And that leads us directly into the prerequisites and system requirements heavily outlined in the introduction.
The unglamorous part.
Right. It starts simply enough. It mandates that you need a working knowledge of your underlying operating system. You need to know how to navigate file structures, use standard menus, and execute basic open, save, and close operations.
Basic computer literacy.
Yeah, it even politely suggests that if you don't know how to do that, you need to go read your Windows or Mac OS documentation first, because this book isn't going to hold your hand through that.
Which is fair.
Very fair. But then it gets into the highly specific hardware requirements. It notes that to access certain advanced Photoshop CC features, specifically all 3D features, your system requires at least 512 megabytes of VRAM.
Which is dedicated graphics memory.
Right. Furthermore, if you're operating on a Windows machine, a 64-bit operating system is absolutely strictly required. Let's break this down, starting with VRAM. I want to move past basic explanations here. We know RAM is system memory, but I like to think of VRAM like a craftsman's workbench.
Oh, I like that.
Regular system RAM is the massive warehouse out back where you store all your supplies and tools. But VRAM is the actual physical workbench directly in front of you.
Right.
If you're doing intense 3D work, you need all your materials on that workbench right now simultaneously because you're constantly rotating and shifting the object. You simply do not have the time to walk to the warehouse to fetch data for every single frame of movement. Why are the 3D features in Photoshop so mathematically intense that the book calls out VRAM specifically, almost as a warning?
Your workbench analogy hits the nail on the head regarding speed and immediate access. When you are working in traditional two-dimensional digital imaging, even with dozens of high-resolution layers, the math the computer is doing is relatively straightforward.
It's just flat.
Exactly. It is mapping static color and brightness values to a fixed X and Y axis on your screen. The central processing unit, the CPU, can handle that, utilizing standard system RAM to store the layer data.
Okay.
But the moment you engage 3D features, extrusion, lighting, texturing, the mathematical complexity explodes exponentially.
Because it's no longer just a flat picture, it's a mathematical simulation of physics and space.
Precisely. The software is no longer just remembering where a pixel is. It has to calculate z-depth. It has to calculate how a simulated virtual light source casts rays, how those rays bounce off a surface based on its specific material texture.
Whether it's matte rubber or highly reflective chrome.
Right, and how the resulting shadows fall onto the objects behind it. And critically, it has to recalculate all of that immense trigonometry in real time every single time you rotate the camera angle, even a fraction of a degree.
That's a massive amount of math.
It is. Standard system RAM, communicating with the CPU, simply doesn't have the bandwidth or the parallel processing architecture to handle millions of simultaneous calculations fast enough to display a smooth frame rate.
It causes a bottleneck. The warehouse is too far away.
Yes. The GPU, the graphics processing unit, is built specifically for parallel mathematical execution, and VRAM is its dedicated, ultra-fast local memory pool.
The workbench.
The workbench.
Yeah.
If your VRAM is too small, if the workbench isn't big enough to hold all the texture, data, and geometry required for that specific 3D scene, the GPU has to swap data back and forth with the much slower standard system RAM. Or worse, page it out to your hard drive. That's the moment the software stutters, freezes, or simply crashes entirely. By explicitly stating the 512 MB VRAM requirement, the book is establishing a hard boundary to protect the user's experience. It's saying if you do not have the specialized hardware to handle this simulation, do not attempt to run it because you will only experience frustration.
That makes total sense. And what about the strict 64-bit operating system requirement for Windows? We all know 32-bit systems are legacy at this point, but what specifically does a 64-bit architecture unlock for a program like Photoshop that makes it a mandatory baseline?
It comes down to addressable memory space. A 32-bit operating system, by its fundamental mathematical architecture, can only address or see a maximum of about 4 gigabytes of RAM.
Just 4 gigs.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you physically install 32 gigabytes of RAM onto your motherboard. The 32-bit OS hits an invisible ceiling at 4 GB and cannot utilize the rest. Now think back to what we just discussed about the 2018 workflow. We aren't just opening single JPEGs anymore. We're opening massive multi-artboard UI designs containing hundreds of layers, smart objects, and high-resolution assets.
You will eat through 4 gigabytes of memory just opening the document.
Exactly. The moment you exceed that 4 GB limit on a 32-bit system, Photoshop is forced to use your hard drive as a scratch disk, treating physical storage like RAM.
And hard drives are slow.
Exponentially slower than RAM, and the system grinds to an absolute halt. A 64-bit architecture shatters that ceiling, allowing the operating system and, by extension, Photoshop to address virtually unlimited pools of memory. Terabytes of it, theoretically.
Wow.
It allows the software to hold these massive, complex 2018-era project files entirely within high-speed active memory. It's the architectural foundation that makes modern, non-destructive editing possible.
Okay, so our foundation is poured,
Yeah.
the hardware architecture is solid, now we have to actually get the tools into the shop and organize them.
Yes.
The text outlines the Adobe ecosystem. It explicitly states that to complete the lessons in this book, you must install both Adobe Photoshop CC, the 2018 release, and Adobe Bridge CC. And you have to do this via the overarching Adobe Creative Cloud desktop application. Now, I want to ask about Adobe Bridge.
Okay.
I completely understand why you need to install Photoshop to execute the edits. But why does a professional workflow demand an entirely separate, robust application just to look at the files? I hear this from creatives all the time. They ask, why can't I just use macOS Finder or Windows Explorer to open my files? Why this extra piece of software?
That is exactly where many self-taught creatives hit a massive efficiency wall. They skip Bridge because they view it as a redundant file browser. But relying on your operating system's default file explorer to manage a professional commercial asset library is like tossing all of your expensive tools, client blueprints, and raw materials into a massive unsorted pile in the center of your workshop.
It's just a giant mess.
Yes. If you dig long enough, you can technically find the chisel you need, but the friction is immense and you will eventually lose something critical.
Right. Staring at a folder containing 800 files named img4592.cr2 through a standard OS window provides absolutely zero actionable information.
Precisely. macOS Finder and Windows Explorer are built for general computing, finding Word documents and spreadsheets. They are fundamentally blind to the deep needs of a creative workflow. Adobe Bridge is not a file browser. It is a digital asset management system, a DAM.
Okay.
It is built to read and interact with the deep XMP metadata embedded within creative files.
So it's reading the DNA of the file, not just the name.
Yes, Bridge can instantly show you not just a high-resolution preview of a raw file, but exactly what camera body shot it, what lens was attached, the exact focal length, the ISO, the shutter speed, and the specific color profile.
That's incredibly detailed.
But more importantly, it allows you to manipulate data at scale. Imagine you just finished a massive commercial product shoot with 2,000 raw images. Your operating system cannot help you process those. Bridge allows you to batch rename all 2,000 files according to the client's strict naming conventions in roughly 3 seconds.
3 seconds versus 3 hours.
Exactly. It allows you to inject your copyright information into the metadata of every single file simultaneously. It allows you to rapidly review the shoot, applying star ratings and color labels to quickly isolate the selects from the rejects.
It's basically air traffic control for your creative work. It sits above the software and directs the flow of assets.
Exactly. The book insists on its installation because professional asset management is not an optional add-on. It is just as critical as the editing itself.
Yeah.
If you spend 4 hours beautifully retouching a hero image for a campaign, but you can't locate it 2 weeks later when the client requests a revision because you saved it in a random desktop folder with an unsearchable name, that brilliant creative work is effectively worthless.
It's gone.
By forcing the reader to install and utilize Bridge from Chapter 1, the curriculum is cementing the reality that professional organization is a non-negotiable prerequisite for sustainable creativity.
That is a profound point. Organization is the unsung, invisible hero of creativity. You cannot operate at a high creative level if your cognitive energy is constantly drained by hunting for lost files.
Absolutely not.
So our files are meticulously organized in Bridge, our 64-bit hardware is ready, we locate the application icon, and we finally click open. The software boots up, the dark gray interface appears.
We're in.
But before you even think about starting lesson 1, there is a crucial, mandatory step the text outlines. A step that, in my experience, most ambitious beginners completely ignore, and they do so at their own immense peril. This is what I call the golden rule of software tutorials.
You are talking about restoring default preferences.
I am. The text explicitly states that the Photoshop preferences file stores detailed information about panel locations, tool settings, and command behaviors. Every single time you quit the application, it remembers exactly how you left the workspace and saves that state into the preferences file.
Right.
The book mandates that to ensure what you see on screen matches the screenshots and instructions in the book, you must execute a specific keyboard command upon startup to restore the default preferences as you begin each new lesson.
Yes.
I always compare this to renting a car or sharing a vehicle with someone who has completely different physical proportions than you. Before you even put the key in the ignition, you have to reset the seat position. You have to adjust the steering column. You have to fix all 3 mirrors. And you probably want to change the radio station back to default.
It's a great analogy.
If you simply jump in and try to merge onto the highway while fighting the previous driver's setup, where you can't reach the pedals and the mirrors are pointing at the sky, you are going to crash.
It is the exact same dynamic, and the crash in this context is cognitive overload.
How so?
If a learner skips this preference reset, the resulting frustration can completely derail the educational experience. Imagine you are working through a complex chapter on advanced compositing. You read step 3, which says, now select the layer mask icon at the bottom of the layers panel.
Okay.
But because you were experimenting with custom workspaces last week, or perhaps a colleague used the machine, your layers panel isn't docked on the right side of the screen. It's either floating randomly over your image, nested behind the channels panel, or it has been closed entirely and is hidden.
The immediate reaction is panic.
Complete panic.
The learner assumes my version of Photoshop is broken, or worse, I am not smart enough to figure this out.
Exactly. The learner instantly feels lost. The cognitive load required to learn a fundamentally new software concept, like the mathematics of blend modes or layer masking, is already incredibly high.
You're already stressed.
Right. If you compound that challenge with the unnecessary friction of a mismatched, chaotic user interface, the learner's brain simply gives up. The curriculum mandates this preference reset to provide a baseline of psychological comfort and pedagogical consistency.
And make sure everyone is on the same page.
It ensures that your software looks exactly pixel for pixel, like the instructor's screenshots. It creates a controlled, predictable laboratory environment where the only variable you have to focus on is the new skill you are trying to acquire.
It levels the playing field every single time you sit down. It's a clean workbench.
Hmm?
But the book also recognizes a critical reality of the professional world. Wiping out all of your deeply customized preferences can be a terrifying prospect.
Oh, for a working pro, it's terrifying.
And this brings us to what might be the most meticulously detailed set of instructions in the entire introductory chapter. The ultimate safety net of saving your color settings. The text doesn't just casually mention, hey, back up your settings. It walks you through a highly deliberate, step-by-step extraction process. It tells you to start Photoshop, navigate to edit, then color settings. Look at the settings drop-down menu. If it displays anything other than custom, you are instructed to write the name down on a piece of paper and hit OK.
Very specific.
But if custom is selected, you must click Save. It explicitly notes that the default location is the hidden settings folder, and the file extension will be .csf. It commands you to type a highly descriptive name, click Save, and then, and this is the part I find most fascinating, a secondary color settings comment dialog box pops up, and the text instructs you to type descriptive text to identify these settings later, suggesting you include the date or your specific work group.
Right.
So what does this all mean? Let's explore the gravity of this. Why does this specific tiny little file .csf file that is probably only a few kilobytes in size warrant such a massive detailed multi-step warning? And why does the software force the user to write what is essentially a diary entry in the comment box?
To understand why the book treats this exact process with such intense reverence, you have to understand the catastrophic implications of color mismanagement. Color profiles are the absolute lifeblood of professional commercial imaging.
So this isn't just about making sure the sunset looks pretty and vibrant on your MacBook screen.
Not at all. Human perception of color is highly subjective, but in a professional print or digital delivery workflow, color has to be mathematically objective and strictly controlled.
Okay.
A color settings file, or a custom color profile, dictates exactly how Photoshop interprets and translates the underlying mathematical color values of your image into visible light on a monitor or into physical ink droplets on a printing press.
Can you give us an example?
Let's frame this with a real-world disaster scenario. Imagine you are the lead retoucher for a massive, multi-million-dollar global advertising campaign for a major automotive brand. The brand has a highly specific, trademarked metallic blue paint color.
Like a signature color.
Exactly. You spend 60 hours meticulously color grading the hero imagery so the reflections are perfect, and the blue matches the brand's exact Pantone specifications. Crucially, you are viewing and proofing this work through a specific, highly customized color profile designed exactly for the specific web offset printing press that will run the magazine ad, say, a customized FOGRA or swap profile.
Okay, the stakes are incredibly high if the math is logged in.
Exactly. But let's say you decide to work through a tutorial on your lunch break. You reset your Photoshop preferences, as instructed, to get that clean workspace.
Oh no.
In doing so, you wipe out that active custom color setting, and the software silently reverts to a generic default, perhaps standard North American general purpose 2.
You don't even realize it.
The next morning, you open your automotive campaign file. Because the color settings have changed, the mathematical interpretation of the pixels has fundamentally shifted. The trademarked metallic blue now looks slightly desaturated, perhaps leaning a little too cyan.
And the truly terrifying part is your eye adjusts to the screen. You might not even realize the shift has occurred until the file is exported and sent to the printer.
Precisely. You ship the file, the magazine is printed, millions of copies are distributed globally, and the client is absolutely furious because their flagship vehicle looks the wrong color.
That's a disaster.
That mistake can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in misprints, and it will almost certainly cost you the client. A CSF file protects against that exact catastrophe. The book goes out of its way to force you to back it up because losing it is completely devastating to a professional pipeline.
And that explains the mandatory comment box. It is a temporal communication tool to your future self.
Yes. 6 months down the line, when you are looking at a system folder full of cryptic files named profile1.csf and custom.a.csf, you will have absolutely no idea what mathematical conversions they represent. By forcing you to write a detailed comment like, "Settings for automotive client fall print run 2018 do not alter," It ensures you can safely and confidently navigate back to that exact mathematical workflow the moment you need it.
It's teaching professional hygiene. You aren't just learning how to use the lasso tool, you are learning how to build guardrails so you don't destroy your own career.
Exactly.
And speaking of the future, that leads us to the final major conceptual shift presented in this introduction. This raises an important question regarding the nature of educational publishing. What happens when you finish the book? Or, perhaps more urgently in the modern era of continuous software development, what happens when Adobe completely updates the software right in the middle of the calendar year? We aren't buying software in cardboard boxes on CD-ROMs anymore that stay perfectly static for 3 years until the next version is released.
Right. The Adobe Creative Cloud model is defined by continuous deployment. The software is a living entity, constantly evolving, which presents a fundamental existential problem for a physical printed textbook. How does a paper book, which is locked in time the moment the ink hits the page, stay relevant when the software interface it describes might undergo a major overhaul 3 months after publication?
And the solution they outline is a massive leap forward: the web edition and its integrated online content. The text explains that your purchase of the classroom in a book, regardless of whether you bought a digital copy or the physical print version, grants you access to a comprehensive online portal provided through peachpit.com.
It's an essential resource.
It acts as an extended digital universe for the printed curriculum. Now, the book gives detailed instructions on how to access this, involving creating accounts and verifying purchases. But the mechanics of logging in aren't what's interesting here. What's fascinating is what this portal actually represents. This isn't just a lazy PDF copy of the text thrown onto a server.
No, it's very interactive.
It contains hours of instructional video directly keyed to the text, interactive quizzes to enforce that active recall we discussed earlier, and crucially, this is the silver bullet for the update problem. The text states that the web edition may be actively updated when Adobe adds significant feature changes between major Creative Cloud releases.
This represents a brilliant pedagogical evolution of the textbook itself. Historically, a textbook was viewed as an authoritative, absolute, but ultimately static object. The moment it was printed, it began the slow process of drifting out of date.
It was basically a snapshot in time.
Yes. By tethering the physical book to this dynamic, updatable web edition, the curriculum transforms into a living document. It adapts to the cloud-based reality of the software it is trying to teach.
Right.
If Adobe's engineering team completely overhauls the layout of the Select and Mask workspace in a mid-year point update, the publisher can dynamically rewrite and update those specific sections in the online web edition, ensuring the learner is never left stranded, staring at obsolete instructions that no longer match the screen in front of them.
It's a hybrid learning model that gives you the best of both worlds. You get the tactile, focused experience of a physical book on your desk, which is great for reducing screen fatigue, combined with the agility and responsiveness of a web platform.
Absolutely.
And of course, this online portal is also the distribution hub for the lesson files themselves. The text explicitly states you need to download these specific project files to work through the lessons. And there's a very strict, almost ominous warning included here.
I love this warning.
As you complete each lesson, you may want to keep your start files. In case you overwrite them, you can restore the original files by downloading them again from your account page.
It's another subtle yet vital lesson in professional data management and archival hygiene. Never, ever destroy your original source file. Always work on a duplicate copy. Because if you make a catastrophic error in your editing process, say you flatten the image and accidentally hit save, destroying all your layers, you need a reliable path back to zero. You must always protect the source data.
And what happens when you eventually outgrow the curriculum? Because even a living document has a final chapter. I found the book itself to be incredibly humble and self-aware here.
It is.
It explicitly states this is not meant to replace documentation that comes with the program, or to be a comprehensive reference for every feature. It openly admits it only covers the specific commands and workflows utilized in its curated lessons.
Which is very refreshing.
Right. But rather than leaving you hanging, it hands you a detailed map to a massive ecosystem of additional resources. It directs the reader to Adobe Help and Support Online for deep technical documentation. It points you to official Photoshop tutorials, the corporate Photoshop blog, and Julianne Kost's personal blog, which we analyzed earlier.
It points you outward.
Yeah, it links to Adobe forums for peer-to-peer troubleshooting, Adobe add-ons for extending the software's capabilities via plugins, and dedicated resources for educators who are preparing students for the rigorous Adobe Certified Associate exams. It even points to Adobe Authorized Training Centers, ATCs, for those who require in-person, instructor-led courses. I find it incredibly liberating for an educational textbook to admit it doesn't hold all the answers. It says, "We will build your foundation, but here is the entire global community to take you the rest of the way to mastery."
That humility is not just refreshing, it is practically essential because Photoshop is simply too vast and multidisciplinary for any single volume to encompass.
Right.
A photographer uses it entirely differently than a UI designer who uses it entirely differently than a medical illustrator. But among all those resources, I want to highlight one specific revolutionary tool they mention, the Learn panel. The text notes that you can choose Window, then Learn, directly inside the Photoshop application to open interactive tutorials that actually load specialized sample files into your workspace and lead you step-by-step through fundamental skills.
Wait, so the tutorial isn't just a video playing in a browser. The instruction is happening natively inside the software interface itself.
Exactly. This is a brilliant paradigm-shifting onboarding tool. Historically, software education required split attention. You had to look down at a book, read a step, look up at the monitor, hunt for the menu, execute the action, and look back down.
Constant back and forth.
Or you had to constantly pause and rewind a YouTube video on a second monitor. The cognitive friction was high. The in-app Learn panel eliminates that friction.
That's incredible.
The software itself is recognizing your actions and guiding you natively within the active environment. It brings the instruction directly into the context where the actual work happens.
It's like the master woodworker physically holding your hands while you guide the chisel along the wood, rather than just shouting instructions at you from across the room while you try to figure out the angle yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, and remarkably, we extracted all of this from just an introductory chapter. We started by looking at the core underlying philosophy of the classroom in a book, how it maps perfectly to adult learning theory by accommodating both linear beginners and problem-solving veterans, and why establishing a non-destructive workflow via Adobe Camera Raw is the absolute essential first step in professional imaging.
A critical foundation.
We explored the massive paradigm shifts represented by the 2018 innovations, debating how algorithmic tools like face-aware Liquify don't destroy art, but rather free up creative bandwidth from tedious mechanics, and how the critical shift to multiple artboards and automated web export reflects an industry completely dominated by mobile-first digital economies.
Right.
We discussed the absolute necessity of pouring a solid hardware foundation, the vital importance of dedicated VRAM for complex 3D rendering tasks, and why an application like Adobe Bridge acts as the indispensable air traffic control system for your professional assets.
Don't skip your bridge.
Seriously, don't. And we locked in those crucial, career-saving workflow safety nets, resetting your preferences for a psychologically clean slate and guarding your mathematical color settings with your life. Finally, we looked at how the curriculum breaks the boundaries of print, connecting you to a dynamic, continuously updated web edition, in-app interactive tutorials, and a vast online community of professional resources.
It really is a comprehensive masterclass in setting a user up for sustainable, long-term success, long before they even make their first digital brushstroke.
It really is.
And looking at the entire scope of this curriculum, it leaves me with a broader thought I'd like to pose regarding the future of creative tools. We've seen how this classroom in a book bridges the gap between traditional physical reading and interactive digital learning through its dynamic web edition and those incredibly contextual in-app Learn panels.
Yeah.
As software updates become entirely continuous rather than annual, and as machine learning becomes deeply integrated into the interface, it forces us to ask a profound question about the trajectory of our industry.
What's that?
Are we rapidly moving toward a future where the software itself becomes the ultimate teacher? A future where the application anticipates your specific skill level, analyzes your workflow bottlenecks, and generates custom interactive lessons in real time to correct your bad habits.
Wow.
And if we do reach that point, how does the fundamental role of the human artist evolve when the tool you are using is actively, intelligently training you on how to use it?
That is an incredible, slightly unnerving question to leave on. If the invisible digital workshop starts teaching you how to use the chisels, the moment you walk through the door, the barrier to entry completely vanishes. But the ceiling for what constitutes true, uniquely human mastery changes completely. Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring your workspaces, keep pushing the boundaries of your digital tools, and for the love of all things holy, remember to back up your custom color profiles before you start a tutorial. Until next time, keep your creative workflow meticulously organized.